The next thing I knew, I was falling, and the ocean surged up to meet me, black and cold, engulfing me whole. "Enjoy the swim with the sharks," my husband muttered in my ear as his hands pressed firmly on my back. The boat was drawing away, its engine roaring louder every second. And I could see my husband, Bradley, and his mother, Eleanor, on the deck, watching me writhe in the sea as I struggled to the surface, gasping and my lungs burning as salt water filled my mouth. The water was chilly, my garments dragged me down, heavy and unforgiving, and Eleanor's laughter sounded shrill and joyful, as if this was the best amusement she had had in years. "My name is Lindsay, I'm 32, and I recently discovered that my husband attempted to kill me. We were meant to be on vacation, a leisurely trip to celebrate our 3rd wedding anniversary, and Bradley had suggested that we bring his mother along. Every kick felt like pushing through concrete, and I was in shock at what had just transpired. I imagined a lot of things about Bradley that turned out to be incorrect, but I agreed because I thought it would make him happy, even though I hadn't wanted her there. She claimed to have been lonely since his father passed away. I could not see the Florida shoreline behind me, but I could feel my arms aching as I treaded water, trying to stay afloat, trying to think, while the yacht got smaller in the distance. It was obvious that they were not returning. Panic gripped at my throat, threatening to drag me down quicker than the water could. I am an entrepreneur in biotechnology, and I started my business from nothing. There was nothing but limitless ocean in every way. Converted it into a $2.5 billion empire. I've had to deal with investors who believed a woman couldn't manage a pharmaceutical firm, hostile takeovers, and patent fights. I've also had to face boardrooms full of males who wanted to see me fail. Bradley and I met 5 years ago at a medical conference in Seattle. He was a charming, attentive consultant for healthcare startups, but none of that prepared me for this moment, alone in the ocean, abandoned by the man I'd trusted with everything. He seemed different from the opportunists who typically circled around wealthy women looking for an easy ride, and he said all the right things. He also made me laugh when the burden of operating my business felt too much to handle. Eleanor, his mother, who had grown up rich, married into even more riches, and felt that money was something you inherited rather than earned, never liked me and made it plain from the first time we met that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She called me new money, as if it were a sickness, and she told Bradley that he was marrying beneath himself, but he married me nonetheless, and I felt it meant something. She was deeply angry that I had earned my fortune through hard labor. A voice in the back of my mind was screaming that I was going to die out here, so I forced myself to keep swimming and keep my head above the surface even though I felt like love had won. The water felt colder now, and my fingers were becoming numb. I reflected on the last few months, searching for clues I had missed, but another voice, the one that had defied all odds to build a billion-dollar firm, refused to believe it. Bradley had been different lately, more aloof. I had assumed he was concerned about the future, about safeguarding what we had created together. But he had begun to inquire about my business, the organization of my assets, and what would happen to everything if I were to die. As I relived the morning in my mind, I realized that Eleanor had been complicit in his plans to take everything away from me and that she had requested that I come up on deck to witness the dolphins. I had sensed Bradley's presence behind me when I stood at the railing, staring out at the ocean. And then he said those words in my ear, so casual and chilly, as if he were making a remark about the weather rather than taking my life. Bradley had been waiting there, his face unreadable. I drank more salt water after a wave broke over my head. My legs felt like lead, and my throat burned. I was unable to remain afloat for very long, but then I noticed a fishing boat in the distance, about half a mile distant. I started swimming since it was my last chance, and even though every stroke felt impossible, I persisted. The fishing boat got bigger, and I could see people on deck. I tried to yell, but my voice was lost as the ocean and tiredness overtook me. I splashed my arms, frantically trying to get attention, and someone gestured toward me. The boat veered toward me, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me, giving me just enough strength to keep my head above water. I made a pledge to myself as the fishing boat pulled alongside me and powerful hands reached down to pull me out of the water. Bradley and Eleanor believed they had won. They were coming. I was going to survive this. They had no idea what was coming for them. I wasn't just going to live. I was going to ruin them both. The fishermen who saved me were a Miami father and son team going fishing for the night. They believed I was dead and that they would receive everything I had worked for. The father, Thomas, looked at me sympathetically as they wrapped me in blankets, offered me hot coffee, and asked if I needed a hospital. I replied that I didn't, that I just wanted a phone and a way back to shore that didn't entail any formal reporting. "You're running from something?" he inquired gently as his son steered the boat back toward the coast. He'd seen enough in his 60 years to know when someone didn't want questions addressed. "Moving in the direction of something?" I made the correction. "Revenge?" He nodded as if it were obvious. Maybe it did. I made 3 calls on his cell phone, which his son loaned me. The first was to Patricia, my head of security, a veteran FBI agent who had been with my business from the start. The second was addressed to my attorney, Gregory, a shark who specialized in the type of legal battle I was going to engage in. The third was to my best friend and business associate, Diana, a talented scientist who had assisted me in creating our pharmaceutical empire and would go above and beyond to support me now. I informed them about Bradley and Eleanor's actions. I advised them to get ready for battle and that I had to return home without anyone noticing that I was still alive. Diana was waiting with a car with tinted windows, a burner phone, and dry clothing when the fishing boat arrived at a private port that she owned. She was crying as she gave me such a strong hug that I felt my ribs could break. She muttered, "I thought you were dead. Bradley informed the Coast Guard that you had perished after falling overboard. I believed I had lost you." He dialed the Coast Guard. That was brave. Bold yet stupid. It was 2 hours ago. Claimed to be taking pictures. Leaned over the railing too much. Before he could grab you, fall. The Coast Guard is currently conducting a search. Diana's tone was resentful. On the phone, he even sobbed. A very compelling performance. Something cooled down in my chest. Bradley was already acting like a bereaved widower, so he was acting quickly to seize my possessions before anyone could ask too many probing questions. He wouldn't inherit immediately under our prenuptial agreement, which I had pushed for in spite of his objections. However, my company's shares would be subject to probate if I passed away, and he would have considerable control over the interim management as my widower. Enough to steal, enough to ruin everything I'd worked so hard to build, enough to enrich himself and his mother before anyone noticed. Here's what Bradley was unaware of, though. 6 months ago, I revised my estate documents. I had taken safeguards since I had a persistent sense that he was suddenly interested in my wealth. Everything would now be secured in an irrevocable trust under Patricia and Gregory's supervision, with Diana serving as the backup executive in the event of my death. There would be no money for Bradley. Before getting anything, he would be extensively probed. I still thought I was mistaken about him, so I hadn't told him about the changes. I was not mistaken. Simply put, I was unaware of the extent of his willingness. Diana took me to a safe place she kept for just such situations. In a highly competitive field, every successful entrepreneur had backup plans for hostile takeovers, corporate espionage, and personal threats. It never occurred to me that I would be hiding from my own husband. Patricia and Gregory were waiting inside the safe home. They had already started assembling our necessities. The GPS tracker on the yacht provided security footage that revealed its precise path. Before we departed the marina, Bradley turned off the cameras on the yacht. One more piece of incriminating proof. Phone logs revealed that Bradley and Eleanor had spoken throughout the previous 3 months, which precisely corresponded with the period of time when he inquired about my inheritance. However, Patricia's financial records contained the true treasure trove. Everything was accessible to my security chief. She protects me from corporate thievery as part of her employment. Her discovery chilled my blood. For more than a year, Bradley had been stealing from me. Tiny sums at first, meticulously concealed by a network of dummy corporations, but in the last few months, the theft has increased. He had embezzled almost $15 million from a number of accounts, consistently remaining just below the amount that would cause audits to be initiated automatically. Gregory spread printouts across the table and remarked coldly, "He's been planning this for a long time." Although these shell corporations are registered in the Cayman Islands, I was able to link them to accounts that Eleanor owned. She has been assisting him in concealing the funds. What else was he going to take? Even though I knew the answer, I still asked. Patricia responded plainly, "Everything. After your death, he devised a plan to sell off your personal assets. Ella Lehner could have moved billions before anyone noticed thanks to the appropriate fake paperwork and his connections in the banking industry. It would have taken years to conduct the probe. And the funds would be untraceable by then." I took a seat firmly in one of the seats, feeling the full force of the betrayal. This was neither a moment of weakness nor a crime of passion. In order to rob me and abandon me for dead in the water, Bradley had courted me, married me, and acted as though he loved me for 5 years. And his mother had been there for him at every turn. Diana gave me a shoulder squeeze. "We will hold them accountable for this. What are you interested in doing?" I examined the evidence that was strewn all over the table. Where Bradley had shoved me overboard was indicated by the GPS data. Financial documents that demonstrate theft. Call logs reveal a scheme. For decades, I had everything I needed to lock them both up. Prison, however, was too easy and neat. In that water, I wanted them to experience what I did. They were horrified and helpless as they watched everything they held dear disappear and were powerless to stop it. Quietly, I murmured, "I want to go home. When Bradley enters the room, I want to be there." My home, a contemporary glass and steel marvel with a view of the bay, was situated on 3 acres with coral gables. Every space is a monument to my accomplishments, and every element was flawlessly created by me. When we moved in following the wedding, Bradley had adored it. He had admired many aspects of my achievement at the time. The private jet, the mansion, the cars, and the social standing. He had never been a fan of the woman who had done the building or the amount of work required to construct those things. After nightfall, Patricia took me through the private gate. The lights in the home were glowing. I could see movement inside via the windows. Bradley and Eleanor were at home, most likely having a good time, planning their prosperous future, and most likely already squandering my money. The thought gave me a chilly, piercing smile. "Are you certain about this?" As she parked in the shadows close to the guest home, Patricia requested. "This could be resolved through the judicial system. It's cleaner that way." I assured her that nothing about this would be clean. However, it will be comprehensive. The afternoon had been devoted to meticulous planning. Gregory had frozen all accounts connected to Bradley and Eleanor, including the shell companies, by filing emergency applications with 3 different judges. They would not have access to a single $1 by dawn. Additionally, he had written criminal complaints and sent copies to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and the district attorney. The inquiry would begin right away, before Bradley even realized I was still alive. Through her ties at the corporation, Diana had prevented Bradley from accessing any databases, systems, or information that he may attempt to damage or obtain. His key card was removed, his email account was suspended, and his employment credentials were withdrawn. Security would escort him out if he attempted to access our offices. Additionally, she informed the board of directors about the theft, and they unanimously decided to pursue the greatest possible prosecution. However, such actions were merely pragmatic. Tonight, I had something particular planned. I used my key as I approached my own front door. There was no beep of the alarm. It must have been Bradley's carelessness to disarm it. I followed the sound of voices to the living room while moving discreetly through the marble entrance. They were using crystal glasses to salute each other while sipping my wine, which was $20,000 worth of bottles from my personal collection. Bradley smiled and raised his glass to Lindsay. "I hope she finds comfort in ignorance." Ella Lehner chuckled, making the same high-pitched noise I had heard from the yacht. "It still amazes me that you did it. I was afraid you would suddenly lose your composure." "It was easier than I expected," Bradley remarked nonchalantly, as if he were talking about a business deal rather than murder. She had total faith in me. Never had any suspicions. She simply smiled and stated she wanted to make sure I was taken care of, even when I questioned her about her will. He shook his head, laughing at my folly. In fact, she believed that I loved her. Elena remarked, sinking farther onto my leather couch, women like that always do. Despite their wealth and perceived intelligence, they are yearning for a man's approval. All you needed to do was play the role long enough. And we now own everything she created. Well, Bradley clarified, mainly to you. I'll be the bereaved widower who is unable to manage the company on her own. Using your ties on the board, you will take over as interim CEO. Over the following 2 years, we will quietly sell everything, and then we will be ready for life. We'll be in Switzerland with new identities and more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes by the time anyone discovers what occurred. I entered the space. One issue, but an intriguing plan. Both of them froze, their glasses halfway to their lips, and they stared at me as if I were a ghost, which I suppose I was. Bradley's glass fell. On the hardwood floor, it broke. The smooth surface was covered in red wine, which spread like blood. His face turned completely white, then green, as if he were about to throw up. Eleanor's hand flew to her chest, and she made a sound that was something between a gasp and a scream. Bradley breathed, "Lindsay. How did you feel?" "We witnessed your drowning." Calmly, I finished and moved deeper into the room. "Indeed, you put a lot of effort into making that happen. Regretfully for you, I can swim very well. Remember the high school state champion? Before trying to commit murder, you really ought to have done more research." Eleanor was the first to find her voice, but it was faint and wobbly. "This is ridiculous. You went overboard." Bradley immediately called for assistance. "It has shattered us." Utterly heartbroken. "Keep it." I interrupted her. "I am fully informed. The Cayman Islands shell corporations. The 15 million you have already taken. The strategy to sell off my possessions once I pass away. The 3 months' worth of phone conversations between you two. Arranging every aspect." I took out my phone and raised it. "I have evidence of it all. Financial documents and the yacht's GPS data pinpoint the precise location where Bradley shoved me overboard. Even the video that was captured this afternoon when you turned off the cameras aboard the yacht. You were unaware of the backup systems Patricia established. Everything is ours." Bradley bumped against an end table after tripping backward. A pricey vase fell over and broke. He was hardly aware. "You can't. We can clarify. Describe the attempted murder." I asked in a friendly manner. "Describe fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Go ahead, please. When the FBI arrests you, which should happen in about 3 minutes, I'm sure they'll be captivated by your reasons. They're waiting for my signal outside." Anger twisted Eleanor's face. Something uglier took the place of the terror. "Don't you think you're really smart? You can't prove any of this in court, but you're coming back from the dead to get us. We'll tell everyone that you're mentally disturbed and that you orchestrated this entire situation to get attention. It's your word against ours." I interrupted. "If I hadn't just recorded your whole conversation, that might have worked." It was really helpful when Bradley acknowledged pushing me overboard. "I'm grateful for that." Bradley's knees buckled. With his face in his hands, he took a firm seat on the floor. Eleanor simply stood motionless. I grinned at them both, finally realizing that they had lost everything. My mother-in-law had assisted my husband in his plot to kill me. With a nice tone, I said, "Enjoy the rest of your evening. It's the last one you'll have as free people." I then went to the door and gave Patricia the signal. FBI agents flooded into my house in a matter of seconds. That night, the FBI brought Bradley and Eleanor into custody, and I watched from the doorway as their faces went white and startled as they were shackled and read their rights. With Bradley staring at me as if he couldn't comprehend what was happening. My house was at last peaceful again, and Patricia slept with me that first night. Eleanor tried to keep her composure, elevating her chin and not looking at anyone, but her hands were shaking, and they were loaded into different cars and driven away. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, causing my hands to shake and my heart to race. And I kept thinking about the moment I'd fallen into the ocean. The cold shock of the water, and the certainty that I was going to die. We sat in the kitchen drinking coffee at 3 in the morning, neither of us able to sleep. Something dark and contented would then settle in my chest as I recalled Bradley's face when he saw me alive, the complete dread in his eyes. "Are you okay?" Patricia inquired, closely observing me. "I don't know," I confessed. She shook her head. "They tried to kill you and steal everything you built. You're entitled to whatever you're feeling right now. Is it wrong that I wanted to see them suffer? That I liked watching them get arrested?" she asked. "But you need to prepare yourself. This is just the beginning." She paused, carefully selecting her words, "but it's going to get worse before it gets better. The trial, the media attention, the investigation into every aspect of your life and theirs." She was correct. By morning, the news had spread, someone had given the media information about my attempted murder, and the phone was ringing before the sun came up. All of the major networks wanted to do an interview. Reporters gathered outside my gate. The board released a statement totally supporting me and denouncing Bradley's conduct. And my business's stock first fell amid the confusion before rising when investors knew I was alive and the company was safe. That afternoon, Diana came over with lunch and encouragement, and we sat in my study away from the windows where photographers were attempting to take pictures with telephoto lenses. Diana had brought a bottle of wine and Thai food from my favorite restaurant, but neither of us was particularly hungry. She reassured me that the business was doing well, better than well, in fact. "Our rivals believed we would be exposed without you, so they began attempting to steal our contracts and recruit our researchers. Your near-death experience has really strengthened our market position. Nothing says dedication like surviving a murder attempt and coming back swinging. Now they're backpedaling hard, trying to pretend they never doubted us." She grinned grimly. "Glad my trauma is good for business." "That's not what I meant." Diana's face softened. "I'm just saying you don't need to worry about the company." I chuckled, but it sounded empty. I didn't want time. I wanted to work so that I could concentrate on something other than the fact that my husband had attempted to kill me. "We've got everything taken care of while you deal with this legal nightmare. Take as much time as you need." "How did you return to normal life after learning that the person you loved the most in the world had been plotting your murder?" I wanted to feel normal again, but I had a sneaking suspicion that I would never fully be able to do so. Gregory contacted that evening to provide developments. And the district attorney is moving quickly to charge Bradley and Ella Lehner with money laundering, theft, wire fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence is overwhelming, and both of their attorneys are already discussing plea agreements. I told them right away that I wanted them to stand trial for everything they did, so please give this some serious thought, Lindsay. A trial entails months of your life being dominated by court processes. Giving detailed testimony about your relationship with Bradley. Having every facet of your marriage scrutinized in public. And having your credibility attacked by their defense lawyers, who will accuse you of lying or exaggerating. "I don't care," I answered firmly. "They tried to kill me, Gregory. They planned it for months, stole millions, and would have taken everything if I'd actually died. They'll try to paint you as a controlling, paranoid businesswoman who drove Bradley to desperation." He sighed but made no additional arguments. "I want a jury to hear exactly what they did. I want it on public record." "All right, I'll let the office of the district attorney know that we're not interested in negotiating a plea." He had no idea how ugly things would turn, so be ready for it to get ugly. Eleanor posted bail 2 days later. She was old, according to her attorneys. Posed no flight risk and had no criminal history. In agreement, the judge set bail at $5 million. Eleanor uploaded it right away. It seems that she was hiding money that we haven't yet discovered. She stepped out of jail into a throng of reporters, appearing angry and righteous. "My son is innocent," she said firmly and clearly to the cameras. "Lindsay has a mental illness." Since Bradley finally resisted her domineering methods, she contrived this whole situation to frame us. She has always been envious of our strong relationship and has tried to sow friction between Bradley and his family. Eleanor wasn't merely defending herself, and when I watched the news conference from my study, I felt a cold, heavy feeling settle in my stomach. The truth will be revealed in court, and everyone will realize what type of person she truly is. Decades of social ties, charitable work, and careful image management had made her a respected figure in some circles. And she understood how to play the victim and how to make herself sympathetic. So she was going on the offensive, and she was good at it. Almost instantly, the media's coverage changed. With articles challenging my version of events. Opinion pieces about affluent women who used charges against men as leverage. And interviews with individuals who hardly knew me saying I was cold, cunning, and control-obsessed. Bradley's bail hearing was scheduled for the following week. And someone brought up an old business rival who had sued me years ago. A battle he had lost spectacularly, and he went on television saying I had destroyed his firm out of spite. His attorneys supplied character references from friends and coworkers, including 3 executives from my own company, who reportedly found Bradley endearing and couldn't believe he would hurt anyone, in their pleas to release him pending trial. Patricia stepped up security around my office and home, and I felt terrible reading their words because they were supporting someone who had practically thrown me into the ocean to die. Credible threats and anonymous messages that said I was lying about everything, that I deserved what happened, and that someone should finish what Bradley started had been sent to her. The FBI received the threats, but they did nothing to calm the knot of anxiety that had taken up residence in my chest. Patricia informed me that Ella Lehner is planning this, attempting to sway public opinion against you before your trial through the use of character witnesses, the media campaign, and most likely even threats. Can we provide evidence of this? Working on it, but she's smart enough to protect herself. Everything is going through middlemen, shell corporations, and purportedly independent public relations firms. Patricia's face was serious. Lindsay, she's been preparing for this possibility. She's fighting for her life now, and she's using every weapon she has. She launched a backup plan to damage your credibility the instant she and Bradley were captured. I looked out the window at the reporters still encamped outside my fence. While Eleanor walked free and portrayed me as the culprit, I had been hiding in my own home like a prisoner for days, waiting for a statement, a picture, or anything else to support the story. I said, I have to fight back. How? We discover everything, every dishonest secret Eleanor has been concealing, every lie she has said, and every crime she has committed, and she wants to ruin my name. Patricia must have noticed something in my face because she actually backed off. Okay, let's see how hers holds up to inspection. Patricia grinned softly and said, now we're talking. Give me 48 hours. Patricia delivered in 36 hours, and she arrived at my house with a laptop that had enough dirt on Eleanor to bury her 10 times over, as well as 3 bankers' boxes full of paperwork. Patricia placed files across my dining room table and stated, your mother-in-law is not the dignified society matron she poses as. She is a criminal. For decades. Heart-thumping, I leaned over and said, tell me everything. First, let's talk about Bradley's father, her late husband. I discovered medical records that contradict the reported cause of his death, which was a heart attack 10 years ago. She produced a substantial folder. Heart illness was not in his past. He had frequent checkups, was active and healthy, and everything was in order. Then he abruptly passes away at the age of 58. The physician who signed the death certificate was a close friend of Eleanor's. A doctor who signed fictitious documents lost his medical license 3 years later. Do you believe she killed him? Considering what transpired right after his death, I believe it's worthwhile to look into. Everything was passed on to Eleanor. An estimated $400 million fortune. Here's the intriguing bit, though. Her spouse had written a new will 3 months before his passing. With only a little amount going to Eleanor, this one would have placed the majority of his assets in trust for Bradley and his sister. No one ever filed that will. 2 weeks after the husband's death, the lawyer who wrote it passed away in a car accident. My blood froze. They were both killed by Eleanor. The pattern is there, but it cannot yet be proven. 2 easy deaths. Eleanor has benefited greatly financially, and there are questionable circumstances surrounding both. Patricia took out a second folder. Then there's Catherine, Bradley's sister. When their father passed away, she was 25 years old and a Boston teacher. After the funeral, she and Ella Lehner got into a horrible argument, according to family acquaintances. Eleanor was accused by Catherine of defrauding their father of his money prior to his passing and of manipulating him. She vowed to challenge the will. How did she end up? After 6 months, she vanished. Simply disappeared. Her car remained parked on the street, her apartment remained unaltered, and her bank accounts remained unaltered. After a quick investigation, the cops uncovered nothing. Eleanor informed everyone that Catherine had mental health problems and that she would most likely flee to a new place to start afresh. The case eventually died. I was ill. Do you also believe Eleanor killed her? I believe Catherine became a burden because she knew too much. Patricia's face was stern. I've spent the last 2 days trying to find her. No social media presence, no tax records, no credit card use, and no trace of her anywhere over the previous 10 years. She's either dead or living entirely off the grid under a different identity. I've lost all of my money. It was chilly in the room. In an attempt to comprehend what I was hearing, I encircled myself with my arms. Although I was aware of Eleanor's cruelty, avarice, and manipulation, Bradley and several deaths were shocking. Was he aware? Had he assisted his mother in murdering his sibling and father? There's more, Patricia said. For years, Eleanor has operated a very skilled fraud scheme. Money laundering strategies, offshore accounts, and shell corporations. She has been running insurance scams, embezzling from estates she has been appointed to manage, and stealing from nonprofits she chairs. I discovered proof of at least 20 distinct illegal businesses. We're discussing hundreds of millions of dollars in pilfered funds. She showed me spreadsheets, financial transfers, and falsified documents when she opened her laptop. Eleanor's illegal activity was incredibly extensive. For decades, she had been able to operate with impunity thanks to her social standing and carefully built connections with influential and affluent individuals who were unaware that the sophisticated society woman was defrauding them.